It's one of the most quoted passages in English, a timeless anthem for anyone who dares to try, to risk, and to live a life that matters. You've heard the words, repeated by presidents, athletes, and entrepreneurs, anyone needing a jolt of courage. But what if the true earth-shattering power of that speech isn't just in the words themselves? What if the real force is hidden in plain sight, in the untold story of the man who wrote them? A story of crushing failure, incredible resilience, and a deep personal need to prove his own worth. Today, we're not just going to read The Man in the Arena. We're going to get inside it. We're going to peel back more than a century of history to uncover the raw, personal story and the rhetorical genius that turned a few sentences in a 35-page speech into an immortal call to action. This is the story of how a man, at a crossroads in his own life, forged a shield against cynicism that's just as powerful today as it was in 1910. To understand the speech, you have to understand the man, and more importantly, where he was in his life on April 23, 1910. At that moment, Theodore Roosevelt was not the President of the United States. He'd left office a year before, handing the reins to his chosen successor, William Howard Taft. For the first time in a decade, he was a private citizen. But for a man like Roosevelt, private was a very relative term. Right after his presidency, he took off on a year-long African safari and scientific expedition for the Smithsonian. He was, without a doubt, one of the most famous people in the world. So when he arrived in Paris in the spring of 1910, it was a massive event. He was invited to speak at the Sorbonne, one of the oldest and most prestigious universities in Europe. The grand amphitheater was packed to the rafters with thousands of people, academics, politicians, military officers, and students, all buzzing to hear from the larger-than-life American. But under the surface of this celebrity tour, Roosevelt was restless. He was watching the political situation back home with growing alarm. He felt his successor, Taft, was betraying the progressive principles they'd fought for, siding with the conservative old guard of the Republican Party. Here was a man who had defined himself by action, by being in the center of the storm, now forced to watch from the sidelines. You could feel the tension in the air, a sense that this titan of American politics wasn't done yet. He was a lion in waiting. This speech, titled Citizenship in a Republic, was his chance to lay out his entire worldview. It was a dense, scholarly talk covering everything from a citizen's duties to a nation's character. He was speaking to an old-world audience, the European elite, and warning them against a poison he saw spreading in modern intellectual societies, the poison of cynicism. Roosevelt despised the armchair critic, the intellectual who was too refined and too cool to get his hands dirty with the messy work of making things better. He saw it as a sign of weakness, of decay, a poor way to face life. And this wasn't just a political philosophy for him, it was personal. This was a man whose whole life was a fight against weakness. Born into a wealthy New York family, he was a sickly, asthmatic kid who was told he might not make it out of childhood. He famously remembered his father telling him, "You have the mind, but you have not the body. You must make your body." And so he did, through a brutal regimen of exercise, boxing, and sheer willpower, transforming himself into the rugged icon of the strenuous life. This was a man who had known unimaginable tragedy. In a single horrifying 24-hour period in 1884, his mother died of typhoid fever, and his beloved first wife, Alice, died of kidney disease, which had been tragically accelerated by the birth of their daughter just 2 days earlier. Devastated, Roosevelt fled to the Dakota Badlands. He threw himself into the harsh life of a rancher, channeling his grief into action, living in the saddle, hunting, and even helping to bring in outlaws as a deputy sheriff. That was the Roosevelt way. From charging up Kettle Hill with his Rough Riders to his trust-busting presidency, his life was proof of his belief in doing over watching. So when he stood on that stage at the Sorbonne, he wasn't just giving a political lecture. He was preaching the gospel that had saved him again and again. The words he was about to say were forged in personal loss, physical struggle, and political battle. What made the speech so powerful was that the speaker himself was the living embodiment of his message. He was the man in the arena. The famous passage, the one we all know, is actually buried deep inside this long, complicated speech. It doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. Roosevelt spends a lot of time setting the stage, building his case for the kind of character a republic needs to survive. He argues that things like intelligence and efficiency are useless, even dangerous, if they aren't guided by a strong moral compass and a readiness to act. He directly challenges the audience of academics and elites, warning them against the temptation to pose as a cynic. And then, after laying all that groundwork, he delivers the immortal lines. Let's break it down. He starts with a dismissal. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. This is a brilliant opening shot. He immediately invalidates his opposition. In 1910, the critic was the journalist, the political rival, the cynical intellectual watching from a safe distance. Roosevelt is essentially saying, "Your opinion doesn't matter here." The language is so precise. The critic doesn't do the work. He just points out. It's a passive, almost cowardly act. And the alliteration, critic who counts, doer of deeds, makes the contrast sharp and memorable. Then comes the pivot, where he shifts all the value from the sidelines to the playing field. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena. The metaphor of the arena is perfect. It makes you think of a Roman gladiator, a place of public struggle, high stakes, and real conflict. But it's also broad enough to represent any field of human effort: politics, business, art, life itself. To be in the arena means you're a participant, not a spectator. It's a declaration that worth is found in showing up. Now, Roosevelt paints a picture of this man, and it isn't pretty. This is where the speech gets brutally honest, and that's what makes it so powerful, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. This is pure, visceral imagery. It's an appeal straight to our senses. The man in the arena is not clean. He's not perfect. He is messy, struggling, and has taken some hits. The mix of dust and sweat and blood is a potent symbol for hard work, exhaustion, and sacrifice. It makes the struggle feel real and strips away any romance. This is not a hero in shining armor. This is a human being in a gritty, painful fight. Roosevelt knew this from his time as a rancher, a soldier, and a reformer. He knew that real work leaves a mark. Next, he takes on the one thing that stops so many of us: failure. Who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. This might be the most revolutionary part of the whole thing. He doesn't just accept failure, he normalizes it. He frames it as a necessary, unavoidable part of trying anything worthwhile. The rhythm of who errs, who comes short again and again, even sounds like the cycle of trying and failing. He's giving us all permission to be imperfect. In a world that demands perfection and shames mistakes, Roosevelt declares that making mistakes isn't just okay, it's proof that you're trying. It's the striving valiantly that actually matters. He then defines the man by his passion and his purpose. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself in a worthy cause? Here he elevates the struggle. It's not just about being busy. It's about being dedicated to something bigger than yourself. Repeating the word great, great enthusiasms, the great devotions, gives the effort a sense of nobility. And the phrase, spends himself, is such a powerful metaphor. The man in the arena is investing his entire life force into a cause he believes in. It's about total commitment, holding nothing back. Finally, Roosevelt brings it all home with the ultimate choice, the final judgment on a life well lived. Who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. This is the knockout punch. He completely reframes our idea of success and failure. He presents two possible outcomes for the person in the arena, winning or failing in a way that is its own kind of victory. To fail while daring greatly is an honorable end. It is infinitely better than the alternative, which he describes with chilling accuracy: the cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. That is the real hell in Roosevelt's philosophy, a life of sitting it out, of being emotionally and spiritually sterile. To be cold and timid is to have never really lived at all. By creating this stark choice, he makes his point undeniable. The real battle isn't between winning and losing. It's between daring and not daring. And for Roosevelt, that's no choice at all. The genius of this passage is how it speaks right to the fears that hold us back. If this deep dive into Roosevelt's power is hitting home for you, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. We're about to connect these 100-year-old words to the arena we all face today, and you won't want to miss how relevant this battle still is. The speech landed with a huge impact. It was widely reported on, and the core message of the man in the arena began to spread, taking on a life of its own and becoming a piece of cultural scripture. Presidents from Richard Nixon to Barack Obama have quoted it. Nelson Mandela reportedly gave a copy to the captain of the South African rugby team before their historic 1995 World Cup. Countless athletes like LeBron James and Tom Brady have used it as a personal mantra. But its most significant modern comeback came from a very different place. A research professor and storyteller named Dr. Brené Brown. In her globally famous work on vulnerability and courage, she found Roosevelt's words and had a massive epiphany. As she put it, "This is vulnerability. Everything I've learned from over a decade of research on vulnerability has taught me this exact lesson." Her best-selling book, Daring Greatly, takes its title straight from the speech and introduced this powerhouse idea to millions of new people. Brown argues that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure we feel when we step into the arena. To be vulnerable is to dare greatly. Roosevelt's speech is the perfect metaphor for this core human experience. He understood over a century ago that the courage to be vulnerable is the foundation of a worthy life. This connection is exactly why the speech feels more relevant today than it did in 1910. We now live in a global digital arena. The critic isn't just a columnist anymore. The critic is an anonymous commenter, a troll hiding behind a screen, a 24/7 chorus of instant judgment. The fear of being pointed at when we stumble has been magnified 1,000,000 times over. Think about it. Every time you post something you created, launch a new business, share a personal story, or just voice an opinion online, you are stepping into an arena. You are making yourself vulnerable. The temptation to stay on the sidelines, to become one of those cold and timid souls, is enormous. We see people shamed and torn down for stumbling in public every single day. Roosevelt's words are the perfect antidote to this modern anxiety. They're a shield against the cynicism the internet breeds so easily. They remind us that the sting of criticism, while it feels real, is nothing compared to the emptiness of sitting on the sidelines. The speech gives us permission to value our own effort more than the opinions of those who aren't in the fight with us. It gives us a blueprint for resilience, reminding us that to be marred by dust and sweat and blood is a badge of honor, not a mark of shame. It's a call to embrace the messy, imperfect, and often painful process of actually doing something. It challenges us to measure our lives not by our lack of failures, but by the presence of courageous effort. In an age of curated perfection and digital outrage, this message isn't just inspiring, it's essential. It's a timeless reminder that our purpose isn't to avoid defeat, but to dare greatly for a cause that makes our one life worthwhile. So, what made Theodore Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech so powerful? It wasn't just one thing. It was a rare combination of the right man, at the right time, with exactly the right words. It was powerful because it was authentic. The words were a perfect mirror of the man who spoke them, a man defined by his own struggles, his recovery from tragedy, and his absolute belief in the strenuous life. He wasn't just talking about the arena. He had spent his entire life inside of it. It was powerful because it was a direct answer to a cultural moment, a warning against the cynical passivity that Roosevelt saw as a threat to modern society. He wasn't just sharing feel-good inspiration. He was making a dead-serious argument about the moral duty of a citizen. And it was powerful because of its masterful language. Through vivid imagery, sharp contrasts, and a deeply humanizing take on failure, Roosevelt wrote a passage that bypasses our brains and speaks directly to our hearts. He gave a name and a sense of nobility to the silent struggle of every person who has ever tried to create, to build, to lead, or to simply live with purpose. Ultimately, the man in the arena lasts because it speaks to a truth we all know. We all face our own arenas. We all know the fear of the critic, both the one out there and the one in our own head. And we all have a choice. We can stand on the sidelines, safe and untested, and join the ranks of those cold and timid souls. Or we can choose to step into the arena. We can choose the sweat and the dust and the blood. We can choose to strive, to risk failure, and to dare greatly. Roosevelt's immortal words don't just tell us which choice to make. They give us the courage to make it. So, the question isn't just what you think of the speech, but what it asks of you. What is your arena? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the words and ideas that shaped our world, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. Thanks for watching.